Seiichi is an ugly, disgusting loser with the riz of a rotten cucumber, who becomes a Giga Chad after eating a magical fruit and acquiring the cheat code to learn any skill he needs instantly. This makes him the most overpowered mage in the isekai verse, and he ends up with a harem of hot girls. But before all this, Seiichi is a fugly class clown, constantly teased for his appearance by wannabe big shots. One day, as he's getting his daily dose of reality check, Kami-sama takes over the school's intercom system and tells everyone they are about to get isekai'd because Earth has had enough of dumb losers. Instead, they'll finally make themselves useful by becoming heroes and wiping some useless Cinderella king shit. Just as this sus god bribes their thoroughly weeb hearts with an RPG setting and skills, Seiichi realizes he's so insignificant that he hasn't even been noticed yet, despite being XXL in size. Right then, the god tells everyone to form groups, and in accordance with shounen main character rules, Seiichi is left alone. Like some big loser with no self-respect, he begs his kind-hearted bull to let him in, only for them to use their newfound appraisal skills to mock his second-rate status and mid-tier skills. Before he even digests this, they even call him a stinky, smelly skunk, turning his teary eyes into the amoeba boys. Just then, the teleportation begins, and once all the arrogant shitheads are gone, Seiichi finally gets the isekai god's attention. Taking pity on his sorry existence, he grants him a special secret skill before kicking him into the hellhole of his RPG verse. Even after a few days in the isekai jungle, Seiichi doesn't adopt the Tarzan aesthetic and struggles to walk and feed his belly. Just as he passes out from hunger, a disgusting worm crawls before him, and his freaky ass abandons all human ethics to grab and devour him, only for some weird entities to kick his ass literally. However, just as he recovers, he finds a nutty fruit beside it and instantly grabs it. Later, he wonders if it's even edible, almost as if he wasn't just ready to stuff a slimy bug in his disgusting mouth. He then uses appraisal to discover it's the newest thing in the market, called the evolution fruit. Since it isn't named something like will definitely unalive you poison, Seiichi decides it must be okay to eat it, only to puke from its bitter taste later. Still, hunger forces him to finish it up, and just after he does so, he hops onto his next mission to secure even more food, like a true king of calories. Using his detective skills, he stalks some nearby monkeys to find that their hierarchy level is 120 compared to his measly one. Yet, he still invades their territory, assuming that he's invisible. There, he discovers even more of those weird fruits, along with a science-defying miracle healer, and steals all of it. Meanwhile, some ugly losers meet up at the summoning site of the rest of the guinea pigs. These guys, along with the hot student council president, Kanizuki, are Seiichi's childhood friends and are surprisingly worried for such a disgusting loser like him and wonder what his dumb ass must be doing. Meanwhile, Seiichi uses his bottom-tier IQ to speculate whether to eat a weird-looking mushroom. However, his fat ass wins against common sense, and he chomps down on it, only to faint from the poison later. On his deathbed, he decides to fulfill his one last wish, which is to eat some more. And he grabs yet another one of those nutty fruits, all the while complaining about its bitter taste. Weirdly enough, this fruit acts as both an antidote to the poison and plot armor to add top-tier skills to his measly arsenal. However, before he gets to celebrate this, a monkey bitch slaps him and yeets him into the air, making him bleed. Seiichi uses his miracle elixir to get a power amp, only to get his ass kicked anyway. As the monkey approaches his paralyzed body with his mouth wide open, Seiichi realizes he's about to get violated. However, his world-class stench saves his V-card, and he receives a bunch of cool items and skills in exchange for the dead monkey. Just before he celebrates this, a weird voice in his head tells him she's activating the fruit of evolution, and the rest is history. Seiichi wakes up a while later only to find that the gods of plot twist have maxed out his riz after a miraculous workout session that could have put all the fitness coaches out of business. On top of this, he realizes he has received yet another set of new skills and that he's still at level 1 out of 10 of evolution. This only serves to piss him off as he's still at the bottom tier of the ecosystem compared to the level 120 monkeys. 5 months later, as he enjoys some fresh piss water, Seiichi gets surprise attacked by a bunch of rabid wolves, all blessed with an op pair of Sharingan. As he holds them back with a big, dirty bone, The beast blasts a radioactive ball of saliva at him, which he barely dodges, and eventually ends its game with a super cool kick. This baffles him since he knows he's a total wimp compared to a level 311 wolf, but shrugs it off after blaming his protagonist privilege. In fact, after the dead wolf turns into a bunch of sweet treats for Seiichi, his MC card blesses him with yet another ass pull in the name of water magic. He also gets a wolf knowledge book, as he did after defeating the monkey, and realizes both books have zero knowledge about a suspicious area on the map. Channeling his inner Dora the Explorer, his dimwit decides to investigate it later. However, his plans get ruined when evolution gets triggered again, and he becomes paralyzed for the next few hours. When he later comes to, his already tried existence finds that he's surrounded by a bunch of ugly monkeys. On top of it all, they've brought their big boss with them this time. This pink Shrek has a rather cute sense of fashion on top of its Vin Diesel voice, and it challenges Seiichi for a fight. On the other hand, the wimp backs away at light speed upon learning this gorilla's power level is over 700. However, this guy refuses to let him go and smashes the ground beneath them, which Seiichi barely dodges. However, as the Lords of Plot Twist intervene, it turns out that this guy isn't a guy, but a she-gorilla who is extremely turned on by Seiichi withstanding a punch from her, something that has never happened to her before, as her blushing face eternally traumatizes Seiichi. The gorilla mentions how she's down bad for strong Sigma males, provoking him to charge at her with a kick, only for her to evade it easily. She answers this with a chakra-infused punch, which destroys half the forest. However, Seiichi's plot armor saves him this time too, only for the she-gorilla to simp for him even more. Seiichi rejects her and reminds her she's a gorilla, only for her Delulu ass to deny it and insist that she's just Saria. Frustrated, Seiichi can't digest that she has a pretty girl's name. But Saria only focuses on the positive and fangirls over being called pretty. Seiichi tries to wipe the annoying grin off her face with a flashy claw, only for her to dodge it and answer him with a mid-air jet attack that he, once again, manages to dodge. With nothing left to use, Seiichi turns to his ultimate trump card, the water magic dagger, and summons a huge water stream to erase Saria from existence, only to bring that upon himself in the end, as his own stupidity embarrasses him. The King Kong wannabe unleashes recurrent fists upon him, which he barely withstands. As his face bleeds, Seiichi wonders if he's going to die, but gets easily resurrected with the power of flashbacks and recalls the deadliest attack in his arsenal, his stench. With this, he flashes his armpits at the gorilla, hoping to paralyze her. However, this backfires, and the nasty gorilla falls in love with his cheap, natural perfume and begs him to marry her. Just as Seiichi thinks about ways to reject his first ever proposal, she picks him up and leaves. Once she brings him to her house, the she-gorilla tries to impress Seiichi with her culinary skills and refuses to let him go, claiming he's her husband now. He tries to explain that they are different species, but she believes that where there's a hole, there's a way, so they should be okay. Seiichi throws a tantrum at how dumb she is, but she tells him to grab some Snickers since he's not him when he's hungry, and he immediately grabs a thick piece of meat. The food hits the spot to the point that he starts puking laser beams, baffled at how a gorilla can cook better than his useless ass. Hearing this, Saria proposes they immediately head to the jungle marriage court, while Seiichi screams internally. Later, he recalls that one secret spot on both the monkey and wolf maps and wonders if he can escape this clingy fangirl by running away, only for his master scheme to be interrupted by her ugly, annoying face. As she tries to riz him up in vain, Seiichi changes the topic and asks how she can speak when all the other monkeys can't, only for her to bring a bunch of books like some nerd. It consists of the perfect set of spells for a lazy bum like Seiichi, which range from filling your cup with tea to getting instant baths. The latter wipes out his fantasy of a cliched bath scene with hot chicks, which gets further ruined when he instantly learns these third-rate shortcuts to life. Right then, Saria wonders whether he'd like to call her honey or darling after marriage, only for an embarrassed Seiichi to fume and fantasize about escaping soon. Sometime later, as Saria uses her Hulk muscles to catch some fish, Seiichi watches her red velvet cake, wondering if he should leave or keep thirsting after a gorilla. His sanity chooses the first one, but as he crawls away, a huge spider threatens his life, only to be yeeted away by the she-gorilla, who instantly asks if Seiichi is okay. This Riz attack directly hits his heart as he realizes how this is the first time someone has genuinely cared for his useless and worthless existence. Elsewhere, some malnourished guy yaps about how he lost his faith in humanity and wants to be saved from his darkness. Later that day, Seiichi explains to Seiichi that she'll go out on an exploration today to find more fruits of evolution, revealing how they help you reach the peak of your race if you consume enough of them. The name alone brings the most painful flashbacks from his puking sessions, and he wonders if this fruit can turn him into a JoJo character. The gorilla then mentions how she collected 9 fruits for her future husband, but some bastard stole all of them, whom she'll turn into minced meat the moment she finds out. Like a pro-pansy, he gets down on his knees and begs for her forgiveness, admitting that it was him all along. However, like a love-struck maiden, she easily forgives him and realizes they must be star-crossed lovers if such a plot twist has happened. When Seiichi argues against it, she uses her damsel in distress aesthetic to ask if he hates her after all, which he denies. Hearing this as a love confession, her Delulu ass pulls out a wedding dress from thin air, only to be gorilla-zoned again. Later, when she leaves for hunting, Seiichi grins like an idiot and acts on his escape plan. However, it gets sabotaged when he finds the She-Hulk running after him with her steroid-amped ass moments later. He channels his inner Usain Bolt too, and seeks shelter in a shady cave. After walking through its sus gates, he finds the malnourished guy from before still yapping. Upon seeing Seiichi, his Sharingan activates, and he wonders just how strong his rather weak-looking ass is, considering he has reached his rundown cave. Seiichi wonders who this Halloween-themed freak is, only to find he's the edgy demon lord, Xenos, whose power level is over 1500. This radioactive guy pulls out his sword and attacks Seiichi while he's paralyzed with shock, only for Seiichi to shield him. As she starts dying, the respectful demon lord leaves the couple to its privacy and stands like a third wheel at a corner. On the other hand, Seiichi has an emotional breakdown as he asks the gorilla why she saved someone as worthless as him, only for her to blame his irresistible Riz for it. The loser tries to use his medicine-defying elixir to save her, only for Seiichi to explain that she's already dead,
お前はもう死んでいる。何?
and is only able to talk because of plot armor. The crybaby whines even more about how much of a hole he has been to her, and yet she saved him, to which the pink Shrek calls him a kind-hearted Sigma who totally matched her freak, after which she passes away. The baldy in the background mocks Seiichi for clapping gorilla cheeks because he can't get a human girl, only for him to summon his ancient water gun and charge at him with the cliched power of love. When this doesn't work, he summons a dragon drumstick to beat him up, making the demon wonder why he's getting so worked up over some dead monkey. Seiichi confesses that despite the difference in their biology, he loved her, which rizzes up even the half-dead She-Hulk. As she glows from being turned on, Seiichi summons his water gun too and attacks the stick figure, only for him to use black holes to nullify him. The cocky bastard claims he is inevitable and cannot be defeated, only for him to pull out the biggest plot armor in history, the power of love, which defeats a 1,000-year-old demon king with a fancy dollar store dagger. As this guy begins to dissipate too, he thanks Seiichi for showing him true love and reunites with his most likely dead chick. Meanwhile, the loser rushes to the gorilla, who still isn't dead, and kisses her after she says she wanted to be clapped by him. As he tells her not to go, she turns into a literal light bulb and transforms into a hot girl. She instantly gets up and hugs Seiichi, pressing her juicy melons against him, and for a moment, he forgets all about his dead gorilla girlfriend. It turns out that this chick is who Seiichi has transformed into, thanks to Xenos' farewell pity gift, and Seiichi couldn't be happier. The two broke asses immediately look into the treasure, the edgy skeleton left behind, and find a dress shirt and a necklace, which Seiichi tells Seiichi to wear, only to get a nose period right after. On top of it all, he also goes through his final transformation, which gives him high-budget eyes and turns him into a Prince Charming ripoff. This new look makes the ex-gorilla thirst for him even harder, and she swears to follow him to the pits of hell when he mentions wanting to leave the forest and heading to the town. Just then, a new third wheel pops up in the form of Sheep-kun, who congratulates Seiichi for clearing the first dungeon with some traveling coupons and fruit seeds. He further gives their wardrobe the worst downgrade in history and teleports them out of the forest. The ex-loser then holds hands with the hot chick as they head toward the city and swears he won't need more peaches to clap as long as she is with him, not knowing that another baddie with huge plots awaits him on the other side. Meanwhile, as Seiichi, in his low-budget Power Rangers cosplay, and Seiya head to the closest guild to become professional hobos, they encounter the economy version of Rimuru, and Seiichi realizes even a ball of slimy shit has a better power level than his weak existence. However, before he even curses himself, the slime charges at him, only for Seiichi to use his Op 6th Sense and Walmart swords to smash its cheeks. In exchange, he receives some Nintendo cards and some thrift store boots, which he donates to poor Seiya. On top of it all, his ugly Power Rangers outfit gets an upgrade and turns into a cloak, and he earns a free hair salon service, all gifts from Sheep-kun. With their new and improved looks, they head to the guild as planned. When they reach the town, a stupid guard asks to see their identities, and Seiichi says he's from Planet Loser, so he lost his. He sighs, realizing he doesn't get paid enough for this shit, and tests them with some balls of truth, which they both pass. Later, he introduces himself as Claude, the clout chaser, and warns them about ever stepping into the Adventure Guild. Seiichi promises him they won't, only to head straight to it the very next minute. However, Seiichi finally understands why after walking straight into a quirky Sato-Mas roleplay. He closes the gate, assuming it's probably his fantasies he's daydreaming about, only to open the gate and find the same dirty old man getting freaky with some hot babe. Not only that, but a literal man-child, a walking strip show, and a hobo with anger issues. He tries to keep Seiya sheltered from it, almost as if she wasn't trying to sleep with a human in her gorilla form, only to be interrupted by some Japanese Johnny Bravo knockoff with vitamin clothes deficiency. It turns out that this freak show is the guild master as he hip thrusts them into the circus and forces them to sign joining contracts. Once inside, he calls Eris, the freaky babe with the huge plots, and informs her about them, only for her to use magic to change into a viewer-friendly outfit, disappointing Seiichi's wild fan service fantasies. Since she works here as a receptionist and part-time plot queen, she asks Seiichi if he has some important reason why he wants to join this guild, only for him to be reminded of his friends, including Kanazuki, whom he wants to find. But before he says something, Seiya serves as the plot device and uses her charms to convince him to join the guild anyway. Right then, the gate slams open, and a trio of edgy guys with teenage angst walks in and tries to recruit Seiichi into their emo boy band. They bring him out to see a guy with receded hairline, who happens to be their boss. Although he looks like a criminal, upon seeing Seiichi's pretty face, his panties fly off, and he turns out to be a cultured rainbow flag who wants Seiichi to clap his cheeks. When the creeped-out Chad turns him down, the freak even puts on a dance show for him, only for Seiichi to panic and flee the scene at once. He returns to the guild and cleanses his eyes with Seiya's pretty face before telling Johnny Bravo to do something about weirdos like them. The guy laughs and says he wants everyone to fully be themselves, and changes the topic by explaining how Seiichi and Seiya will be heading out on some low-rank missions now, under the supervision of a rank B proctor. Seiichi assumes they'll just be another rainbow freak show, only to be greeted by a baddie with big, juicy melons. Being a man of culture, Seiichi can't help but salivate at the heavenly sight, only for Seiya to remind him she's still here. This baddie is Artoria, a top adventurer with anger issues, who grabs Seiichi by the collar and asks the guild master what makes him think their measly asses will survive her predisposition. The muscle freak points at his beloved muscles and blames them, instantly convincing Artoria, and she agrees to take them. Later, as the three of them head out, Seiichi tries his Riz aura on her and says her smile is cute, making the tough princess blush like an idiot. Seiya joins her fan club too, but later decides she doesn't want to feel like the third wheel and takes on the job of tending to some church kids. Following this, Seiichi asks Artoria why she's working for a literal circus when she could have landed a far better job with her hotcakes. She completely ignores him and tends to a kid who has scratched his knee, only for some wooden planks to fall upon them. Seiichi misses this chance to play her knight in shining armor, but discovers that she's done so herself. After this, the girl boss takes him to an old abandoned building, which they have to demolish, and Seiichi does so with a single punch, only for it to crumble all over him. Artoria can't help but cry as she suffers a mental breakdown upon realizing she's the reason behind it, as her bad luck has affected those around her ever since she was little. Right then, Seiichi wakes up from the dead and explains how he was just suffering from being too overpowered. However, Artoria still grabs him by the collar, and, after giving him some pep talk about how he needs to protect himself, blushes and says she's glad they can still screw each other someday, now that he's alive. Meanwhile, the edgy commander of the kingdom's army tells his sidekick how he doesn't want demons and humans to suck faces anymore, especially not these human kids who came from Earth to wipe their shit. On the other hand, Seiichi gets yeeted from walking a calamity in the name of a dog, while Artoria watches him from afar, laughing. Some hot noble lady wonders if she's looking less constipated than usual because of Seiichi's god-tier face card, only to make her blush. With all their missions completed, the trio returns to the guild. Johnny Bravo pulls out a bag of coins from his eggplant pocket as their reward and tells them to rest their beautiful muscles now. Eris asks if they have a place to stay, and the dumbasses realize they can't raw each other on the forest floor anymore. That's when Artoria steps in and offers to let them stay at her inn, and the freeloaders instantly agree. The next day, the Queen of Fan Service tells Seiichi and Seria to find her some medicinal herbs from the forest for their practice test, and the cocky bastard rushes in with his 0 IQ without hearing any instructions, with his hot bit following right after. Later, it turns out that while Seria has gathered the correct set of leaves, Seiichi shows up with some sus mushrooms like a total noob. He reasons that he's too op to be pulling weeds, only to later piss his pants off when Artoria uses her tsundere card on him. He heads back into the forest, but realizes his luck is in the gutter today. That's when he overhears a bunch of ugly ogres discussing some world domination plan they've set into motion and decides their dumb faces are his only options for a tour guide. However, as soon as he shows up, the ugly bros tense up and introduce themselves as the Demon Lord's third-rate pawns who specialize in making cringe but flashy entrances. Seiichi gets traumatic flashbacks and decides to leave to save his V-card, only for the ogres to stop him. They immediately speed dial their uglier and buffer big bro, who comes crashing with his long, hard wood and smashes Seiichi's empty head. However, plot armor comes to his rescue as another ass pull, allowing him to absorb his opponent's attack and direct it back at them. He smashes the big bro's wood and turns to the minions, only for them to flee with their wet pants. He eventually returns with another batch of multicolored weeds and admits he has no real talents besides his Giga Chad Riz. Artoria sighs and donates her herbs to him in charity, and they move on to the next mission. Meanwhile, in an S&M heaven, a demon lady with massive plot cannons whips the three losers into shape, asking why they disobeyed her and went to the human realm. They explain how they used 100% of their brains to set teleportation traps for the human army so they'd be transported to the evil black dragon god's castle if they stepped on them. The hot babe feels pleased with their evil scheme and rewards them with a sadistic grin and a whipping session. On the other hand, Seiichi and Seria come across the Captain America wannabe from before, who acts even more annoying this time by simping for Artoria and acting like her dad at the same time, saying he's glad she's finally found a good guy to loosen her stuck-up ass. They ignore his freaky fantasies and head to a field to hunt some slimes. As Seria shows off her lack of muscles, Seiichi goes after his sworn enemy, only for the slime to disappear as soon as it steps on a magic circle. Artoria smells something fishy and puts her Sherlock skills to use, only to activate a circle like some dumb freak and yeet both herself and the two sacrificial pawns away. They end up in an old, weary castle where Artoria's ungrateful ass asks the two why they followed her here, only for Seiichi to explain how he couldn't let her two meatballs disappear right before his eyes when he still hasn't smashed them.
I don't think you have the facilities for that, big man.
Hearing this, the chick flashes a smile at him and hands him a piece of rock, explaining how this is an ancient GPS that will tell him her location in case he wants to clap her and will glow red when her life is in danger. Seiichi is more than pleased with the idea. However, before they all celebrate, Artoria's shitty luck strikes again and separates the two with a big, fat wall. Just as she curses herself and tries to find ways to regroup with the two weaklings, Seiichi tries to play Saitama by smashing his fist on the wall, only to realize he's too calcium deficient for that. That's when Seiya suggests they use the third-rate GPS Artoria gave them, only to find that it's even more useless than Seiichi's weak as hell fists. On the other hand, Artoria gets her ass whooped by a guy from Scooby-Doo, but she eventually uses her ultimate weapon, the power of friendship, to slash it in two. As she heads out to find them, Seiichi and Seiya end up in a sus room with a sus chest box after ending up at dead ends after dead ends. Seiichi uses his ultra-weeb knowledge to ignore this box, only for the box to sprout limbs out of thin air and charge at him. The loser casts a magic circle to fight it and finishes it with a water squirt. As a reward, they receive a book about the chest guy's sob story that explains how, after being discarded by humans, this guy turned into a pro-attention seeker and the Avatar. And yet, humans still only thrashed him with rocks. After this, he left his hometown and became a hobo, only to end up in this dragon castle a few years later. As Seiya feels sorry for him, Seiichi looks into the other items, including some more Nintendo cards and a ring of misfortune that multiplies its bearer's luck by -2, leaving Seiichi disappointed. Seiya cures his depression with some fan service as she fondles her melons and pulls out the GPS rock that is now glowing red. On the other hand, Artoria's dimwit brings her into the dragon's lair, and he asks her the dumbest question in history: whether she's here to get eaten. She tells him no with some violence as the metallic guy flexes his wings. Meanwhile, Seiichi and Seiya, along with their shared brain cell, begin panicking over how they can reach Artoria, who is probably already dead. As Seiichi uses his useless fists again, Artoria gets violated by the dragon and resorts to her final trump card, the 8th Gate of Death. Although initially impressed at her flashy aura, the dragon instantly shows Artoria her place when he takes her out with mere blades. As she turns into a selfie stick, the hot babe regrets not seeing Seiichi and Seiya for the last time while the dragon prepares to barbecue her meatballs. However, plot armor intervenes in the shape of Seiichi, who uses his fireproof cloak to shield her from the attack. As soon as Artoria realizes she won't be dying just yet, she asks Seiya how they found her, only for her to recall Seiichi's Sigma Riz and how he finally smashed a wall when he got too worked up about the baddie's safety. On top of it all, he also smashed the dragon's Delulu, which made him think he was some invincible god when he broke through the roof. Artoria keeps acting like a damsel in distress now that she finally has Seiichi's attention. But he leaves her with Seiya and goes on to test his new skills on the pansy metallic beast. The dragon, on the other hand, starts with a roasting session and first roasts his inferior race and then tries to barbecue his weak ass, which Seiichi barely survives. Realizing this guy isn't just some loudmouth with a god complex, Seiichi checks his power level only to find it's over 5,000. Knowing that he's screwed, Seiichi tries to dodge his attacks, only for the dragon to activate his low-level Sharingan and glue him mid-air before whipping him into the cave with his tail. After he falls to the ground in a slow-mo, gravity-defying style, Seiichi wonders why his plot armor isn't working against this final boss. Right then, the dragon guy unleashes his trump card, a massive fireball, and prepares to fry Seiichi's measly existence, only for Seiya to remind him of his water spell from when they fought the first time. With this, he summons his dollar store dagger and brings forth a massive flood, bathing the dragon for the first time in 1,000 years. This pisses him off as he'd gotten attached to all his germs, so when Seiichi tries to dodge his next attack, he uses his long-distance glue to stop him, only for Seiichi's overpowered battle skills to receive yet another pull in the form of glue resistance. With this, he charges at the dragon and makes a jigsaw puzzle out of him, while the poor guy cries over losing to a human for the first time. After the battle concludes, Seiya jumps at Seiichi, and they celebrate until their dimwits realize they don't know the way back home. Just as she begins to panic, Seiichi looks into the new rewards to find something helpful, only to discover a Dragon Ball, which he instantly devours. As this makes him even more powerful, he decides to pair it up with a brand new cloak, which makes Seiya simp for him even more. Suddenly, Sheep-kun decides to upgrade his new look with a DIY hairstyle and congratulates him on clearing yet another dungeon. Following this and Seiichi's newest power-up, he and the girls return using a dimensional portal. Artoria explains to them how she has the luck of -2 million, which is why she's such a nutcase who brings calamities upon herself and the others. Seiichi wonders if the gods of plot compensated for her huge melons by doing so, and even Seiya agrees. When they return to the guild, it turns out that Mr. Johnny Bravo on crack was searching for them by training his muscles even more while Eris was gathering info about their whereabouts. Just as Artoria realizes she is indeed loved, despite being a bag full of shitty luck, she runs away in embarrassment. Seiichi follows right after her like some cringe rom-com male lead while Seiya stays behind. Meanwhile, the hot demon queen informs her useless underlings how their little stunt ended up in their black dragon's death and wonders who could be the shithead behind it. On the other hand, the said shithead comes across the noble lady from before in the market, who is dead set on playing the Cupid for Artoria's sorry, single existence and asks Seiichi to get closer to her if possible. Following this, Seiichi uses their third-rate GPS rock to find Artoria, where they had their first date. She starts by playing a damsel in need of validation, and it works on Seiichi's weak, virgin ass after the genius takes the previous lady's advice literally and hugs her from behind. As she's moved to tears, he delivers a pre-marriage speech about how he'll always be there for her while Seiya, unaware of her boyfriend's cheating antics, waits for him to return. The pansy eventually realizes he's going a bit too hard on the rizzing part of the story, but can't help being the cultured man that he is and sniffs Artoria. As she thanks him for being such a great two-timer, he pulls out the negative luck ring and puts it on her finger, explaining how it'll turn her -2 million into +4 million, only for the deeply embarrassed baddie to run away. Just as she does so, he realizes he may have recruited her to his harem of hotties and feels glad about it, while the noob Artoria wonders what heart condition she's suffering from. The next morning, during breakfast, this cheater throws a tantrum before Seiya about how Artoria has been ignoring him ever since yesterday and asks if she'd like to simp for him today. The ex-gorilla says she has to head to the church today to take care of the kids, and with no bitches left to clap for the day, Seiichi decides to go information hunting too. He heads to the most credible source, first and foremost, the Muscle Freak, only for him to pull out his 3-volume magazines about protein shakes. Disappointed in him, he turns to Eris, only for her to pull out her 3-volume book set about hardcore S&M roleplays, making Seiichi pull his hair out. Eventually, the freaks tell him about the hero summoning in their neighboring kingdom, and the guild master pulls out a map from his panties, telling Seiichi to use the royal library to dig deeper into it instead of using them as his encyclopedia. Meanwhile, the useless king of the kingdom has a meltdown over the upcoming resurrection of the demon lord as he questions his equally disgusting sidekick about how they'll save their asses if the weaklings they've summoned can't fight the villain for them. The sidekick advises that they send them to another kingdom's magic academy as exchange students and use their 17th century tech to enslave them and bind them to their commands. On the other hand, Seiichi gets familiar with the Ice-Sky-Land's politics and realizes that he can't trust their history books as humans are pious angels in all of them and demons, cruel devils. Discarding the idea of becoming a historian, he turns to books about magic, only to learn all of them instantly and suffer from the absolute horror of being the strongest. Later, as Seiya has more fun with kids than she's ever had with Seiichi's cheating ass, the cheater finds a cute girl with animal ears and realizes he has a fetish for chimeras. It turns out that she's an artist and sells masterpieces in exchange for pennies, thanks to her low self-esteem. Being the ever-generous guy, Seiichi buys one of her paintings, much to her gratitude, before following a sweet aroma into a fancy, secret cafe. Although he wishes to see an S&M freak show inside, all he finds is 2 old men enjoying their evening in peace. Meanwhile, Artoria gets high from fantasizing sus scenarios with Seiichi in her mind until her rich friend finds her in an alleyway and takes her home. There, she breaks the big news to her, but Artoria wonders what good her feelings for Seiichi are when he already has Seiya. However, her rich friend reminds her she's a queen whom Seiichi gifted the ring of eternal love, which is why she should quit being a chicken. On the other hand, Seiichi chows down on the delicious meal he's served as the other guy in the cafe introduces himself as Ranz and asks him about his love life. With no concept of privacy, he sings like a bird about how he's timing two hotties at the moment, only to learn that in this kingdom, if a man gives a ring to a woman, it symbolizes the promise of eternal love. In fact, once it's done, he can't save himself from child support with some lame "you deserve better" excuse, since that could result in his sausage being chopped in half, according to the law.
Come on now, dawg.
This is when Seiichi realizes how screwed he is and what he's doing to poor Seiya. His love guru advises him that he marry them both, and in case he can't, he should be honest with them and quit acting like a fuckboy in this day and age. With this, he sets off to straighten his shit. Meanwhile, the kingdom's strongest soldier comes to pick up Ranz, who is secretly a big deal. Later, as Seiichi racks his brain to figure out how to come clean before Seiya and delete the fantasy of clapping Artoria's tan peaches, he finds himself standing in front of the church. However, just as he heads inside to get Seiya, Artoria shows up and kisses him before he even gets to tell her he meant nothing by the ring he gave her. Turns out, this bitch already knows it was merely out of pity for her world-class bad luck, and yet she's still ready to betray poor Seiya for a taste of his sausage. Seiichi, on the other hand, struggles to turn her down when she pulls her "am I not good enough" card and wonders why he has to choose only one chick when he can clap both. Right then, Seiya shows up like his worst nightmare, wondering what these cheaters are doing right in front of the church, and Seiichi turns into a low-budget cartoon to find an excuse. However, the ex-gorilla tells him to accept Artoria's feelings, and even Seiichi can't believe this mother of plot twist, until she explains how all the ladies naturally flock up to strong men, and because there aren't many out there, she was prepared to share him eventually. After Seiichi cries tears of joy at how dumb this chick is, he shamelessly turns around to return Artoria's kiss and promises never to let her regret today. Later, all his friends congratulate this Chad of all Chads on clapping two hot babes at once, while you losers can't even get her to text you back. The very next day, Seiichi and Seiya become the innocent victims of Mr. Johnny Bravo's R18 plot thrust session as he makes sus noises while they eat breakfast. Just as Seiichi complains, he pulls out an address from his piggy bank and tells the loser to touch some grass and get himself a horse. Following his advice, he takes the stinky piece of paper to the said address and realizes that he needs a third chick since his other two are practically ghosting him. As he heads inside the barn, the shopkeeper wonders if he wants a horse for the upcoming Royal Cup, in which multiple horse-like creatures race without rules to win grand prizes. But Seiichi has no idea about it. Still, the deaf guy goes on and on about how his dragon horses are the most popular ones in the race, while the dumb paper cutouts are mostly what he sells to keep his scamming side hustle afloat. Lastly, there's a cocky mule who thinks she's too good to be anyone's pet and kicks the merchant's scamming nuts when he tries to touch her, leaving Seiichi stunned. Being your beloved Gary Sue, he suddenly acquires donkey language and decodes what she's saying, only to realize she's got too big of a head for somebody who's stuck in a stinky, third-rate barn. On the other hand, as soon as the angry bitch realizes Seiichi can understand her, she calls him inside her cubicle and flashes her Kamehameha at him. Next up, she tries to pulverize his future babies too, only for Seiichi to grab her by the legs and lift her in the air, finally teaching her where she belongs. As she later kneels before him and recognizes him as her master, Seiichi realizes even donkeys aren't safe from his god-tier riz and agrees to buy her. Just then, the shopkeeper comes to and begins to lecture the donkey, only to be kicked into oblivion once again. As Seiichi takes her to the town later, she introduces herself as Lulun, and the two of them enjoy a variety of snacks together, making the donkey wonder if he's some generous heaven-sent angel. Just as she expresses her gratitude, Seiichi finds the half-breed cute girl from before, getting lectured by some mansplainer about how she should enter a competition instead of letting her talent rot out in the streets. He butts in with his crappy sense of justice, and the girl, named May, instantly recognizes him as the dude whose pennies saved her business from bankruptcy. When the Aoyama ripoff hears of this, he offers Seiichi to buy one of his deeply emotional abstract paintings, which is basically just a grade school level triangle. After Seiichi refuses to be scammed by him, this guy tries to riz him up by introducing himself as the nobleman Clay, the art prodigy, only to realize this guy is totally riz-proof. Meanwhile, as Mei still refuses to get out of her comfort zone, Seiichi tells her he'll compete in the upcoming Royal Cup, and if he wins, she will have to participate in the art competition too. This works wonders on the girl, and she agrees. Meanwhile, learning that the 5th prize is the most delicious fish in the world, Lulun loses her shit and decides she'll die if she doesn't win 5th place. Soon enough, the competition begins, and a hot babe named Lorna, one of the kingdom's Valkyries, announces this year's prizes, with the 2nd place being their captain's smoking hot photographs and the 1st place being a ticket to spend the entire day with the Valkyries, the kingdom's hottest topic right now. The news makes Seiichi and Lulun's jaws hit the floor, and they decide to avoid these prizes at all costs. As Seiichi's harem cheers for him from the mezzanine, the race begins, and Lulun starts stronger than the rest, only to lose her stride just moments later like a world-class weakling. It turns out that this big-brained idiot skipped breakfast so she could stuff her mouth with the fish once she won the race. But now, her hunger keeps her from even walking. Seiichi sighs and solves this issue by pulling out his ultimate weapon, the evolution fruit, and tells her dimwit to stuff her mouth. Meanwhile, the losers who got scammed into buying the paper cutouts instantly forfeit the race while the others pull each other's legs to stay in the lead. One of these pro racers is a MILF with huge cannons who summons her holy spirits and their feisty big boss to keep all the other losers in check. And it works until Seiichi and Lulun's steroid-pumped ass shows up and gets rid of the weak minions in just a heartbeat. Because of the fruit's effect, Lulun activates Super Saiyan mode and finishes the bigger trash bag with a single kick before resuming the race. Seeing how screwed they are, the others automatically forfeit the race, and Seiichi and Lulun accidentally win 1st place, much to their disappointment. As both Artoria and Saria get promoted from basic simps to ultra simps, Mei decides to enter the painting competition too. Later, as Seiichi consoles a weeping Lulun, she turns into a ball of light. Just then, Saria and Artoria enter his room, only to find him clapping some super hot chick they've never seen before. Moreover, she calls him master and shamelessly hugs him, giving him an instant nose period. Artoria cracks her knuckles, suspecting that he's already working on bagging the 3rd chick in his harem, almost as if she isn't a side chick herself, and beats the poor guy to a pulp without hearing him out. As he recovers from his injuries, Seiichi explains how the donkey is the one who turned into the girl after he fed her an evolution fruit. Though she calls this utter bullshit, Saria proves her wrong by pulling off her pink Shrek transformation, making Artoria realize she's dating the freakiest guy on the planet. Still, since she's head over heels in love with him, she drags Lulun to the nearest thrift store and puts some clothes on her to hide her plots. Seiichi butters her up by lying about how good her sense of fashion is when she literally wears rags 2 sizes too small for herself, or rather, her melons, not that he minds it. Just then, the doors slam open, and 2 more hotties beg to join the Seiichi fan club. One is Lorna from the Royal Games, and the other introduces herself as Claudia from the king's personal hottie heaven. She tells him to put his hands out, and just when Seiichi thinks he might get engaged for the 3rd time, she handcuffs him and drags him away for some sus S&M play. Meanwhile, the demon goddess of plots, Leia, enters a room full of ugly weirdos who reprimand her for being late, only for her to ignore them like a girl boss. They are all professional clowns who shake their peaches for the Demon Lord's circus and wait for his daughter, Lucia, to attend the meeting she called them for. Soon enough, she arrives with Craze, a stinky, fat weirdo with the ugliest sidekick award, and explains that she called the generals of the Demon Lord's army to tell them how she and the king of Seiichi's kingdom are planning to form an alliance. This news sucks the very air out of everyone's lungs until Leia backs her up by revealing that she summoned the Black Dragon's soul a few days ago, only to learn that a human called Seiichi slayed him single-handedly and fairly. Even as Seiichi gets promoted to troublemaker status, Craze doesn't believe her and throws a tantrum about how these very humans are the ones who screwed her father all those years ago, until the only Chad in the group of imbeciles warns him to shut his tone-deaf mouth if he doesn't want to end up dead. Following him, both the Dilf Demon and the pretty femboy hop on the bandwagon and remind this dimwit never to disrespect their daddy's princess again. And eventually, this pig runs away with his tail between his legs. As everyone else pledges their alliance with Lucia, it turns out that Craze is actually a sewerage rat who wants to bring doom upon the demons. On the other hand, Lorna reminds a very annoyed Seiichi how he won the first prize at the Royal Games, because of which he's been summoned to clap the Valkyries for an entire day. Claudia removes his handcuffs and shows him the hottest of them all, Louise, who practically walks with a flower shower all around her. Seiichi's cultured mind instantly begins to imagine sus scenarios, only to be brought back to reality when Lousy whoops multiple learning soldiers in an instant, making even him piss his pants. However, just as he wonders if today is his lucky day, Lousy comes up to greet him and, instead of her hand, gives him a sword to spar with her, despite his obvious reluctance. Meanwhile, some ugly bastards bolt Kanazuki and company at the new academy in hopes of clapping her peaches, only for her to reshape their faces and make it clear that even the enemies to Friend's troop can't get them in her bed. Back in the royal palace, Louise gets weirdly turned on as Seiichi keeps on dodging her slashes as if it's child's play. When all else fails, she finally uses her trump card, her ultimate Riz combined with a super cool kick, only for Seiichi to automatically dodge it upon acquiring yet another pull. As the self-proclaimed swordmaster loses her sword to some wannabe womanizer, all the ladies drop their jaws and struggle to understand what just happened. Although Seiichi is just as spooked as them, Lousy instantly gets down on her knees and asks him to let her into his hot girl harem. However, before he can answer her, Claudia drags him away for some heart-to-heart therapy session. Meanwhile, a cute but dangerous lowly stalks the king of the kingdom with a blade in her grasp. On the other hand, Claudia unfolds Louise's tragic backstory about how she was born into a filthy rich family, grew up to be filthy strong, and yet still somehow manages to play the victim. That's when Louise enters with her walking greenhouse and explains how no one ever measured up to her in terms of brute, except for a shady guy called the Black Paladin, until Seiichi came along. She admits she neither likes stripping men of their armor, nor being treated like some K-pop idol, and thanks Seiichi for saving her from her loneliness. Following this, Claudia cries tears of joy. Louise embraces her with teary eyes, and Seiichi watches as the story goes down the GL route. Just then, the king's maid screams, and as Seiichi follows the Valkyries to find out what happened, they tell him he's just a lame outsider who has no right to step into royal affairs, making him wonder what all their God-sent savior bullshit was all about. However, just as the others head to the king's room to make sure he's okay, Seiichi refuses to leave and uses his portable X-ray eyes to find that the lowly from before is the assassin who just tried to unalive the king. His god eyes discover that the name of this lowly is Olga, who is an enslaved, unaliving machine and is currently heading toward him with lightning speed. He waits right there to welcome her and, once she's there, teases her to get her attention, only for her to answer him with a pair of kunai. Seiichi uses his ninja skills to catch them like a pro and praises her skills, only for his defense skills to auto-activate and yeet those knives back at her. After she's thumb-pinned to the wall, she slips out of her cloak to completely show her adorable cat ears and mindlessly swings her blades at Seiichi. Initially, he dodges them, but when he gets tired of this cat and mouse chase, he simply puts her out. Wondering why such a cute little girl has such an adult-level job. Suddenly, Louise returns with her company of hot babes, and though they don't believe the lowly is the assassin, Lorna takes it upon herself to interrogate her. Claudia boasts she's the only person in the kingdom who's mastered all 3 volumes of Eris's S and M series and has tested them all on the muscle freak's plot hole. As Seiichi tries very hard to get rid of his traumatizing imagination, Claudia wonders why he's still here, and he says he was just worried about the poor king who got his ass busted by a literal kid. Lousy explains how Olga used a cursed knife to attack the king, which has sent him into a deep coma that cannot be undone by any magic, making him wonder if he can put his plot armor to use to chase even more clout. With this in mind, he visits the sleeping beauty in his bedroom, only to discover that this crazy king has been Rand's all along. He also notices the weird pattern evolving on his forearm and wonders what he can do to fix it. Right then, the fanciest guy in the story shows up with his Walmart cosplay and bad hair dye, and Lousy introduces him as her weeb brother, Florio. This guy explains that he's been practically useless in treating the king despite being a doctor and needs Seiichi's god-tier plot armor to save his practice license. After everyone requests him to do something, Seiichi overestimates himself and tries to create a magic spell from scratch, only to discover midway that he's too dumb to create anything other than personal harems. Still, the ass-pulling works wonders, and while he's just chanting some bullshit voodoo charm and wiggling his fingers, neutralizing magic actually takes birth, overinflating his already huge god complex. Happy to be alive, Ranz instantly recognizes Seiichi and wants to thank him, only for Lousy and the girls to block him and jump all over the Dilf instead. Later, Ranz asks what Seiichi wants as a reward, and he requests some time to think it over. In the evening, these two share a hot bath like sworn buddies, and Ranz opens up to Seiichi about his one and only dream, which is to open public baths in the entire country so that girls can relax and cultured men like them can enjoy their happy noises. At the same time, Lorna washes Lousy's sensitive back as she cries with sus noises and simps for her skincare routine. They further fangirl over Seiichi and how cool it was of him to simply ask to be trained in the castle as a reward, instead of thirsting after some bags of gold. Meanwhile, the harem that Seiichi completely forgot about soaks at yet another bathhouse, during which Artoria's jealousy soars high as she suspects Seiichi must be out and about with some other chick right now, almost as if she isn't this side bitch herself. Compared to her sense of self-importance, Saria's stupidity doesn't see any problem with Seiichi expanding his harem even more.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
Simply because she thinks he's just that much of a Riz god. Meanwhile, this Riz god is too busy being Ran's unpaid therapist, and he listens to him when he talks about how he wants humans and demons to live together in harmony and share public baths like this one. On the other hand, the ugly king and his uglier magician get paid a visit by Zakia, the army general, who asks where he has sent all the summoned heroes. The old fart says he teleported them to the Magic Academy so they can learn some real skills and wipe their sorry asses, being the underpaid slaves that they are. It doesn't sit right with Zakia, but when he tries to argue against it, an arrow aimed at the disgusting king breaks in through the window, which he renders useless within a heartbeat. Instead of being grateful, the pair of shitheads tells him to go after the culprit, and he obediently obliges. Meanwhile, Seiichi's harem finally drops by at his new hiding place, and a very jealous Artoria lies to him that Saria is the one who was worried about his loyalty and was wondering whose cheeks he's been clapping behind her back, accusations that Saria immediately denies. Right then, Louise comes running towards the king of Riz, only for Artoria to channel her inner demons at his lying ass. However, upon learning her identity, the tan chick calms down. Moments later, Florio fangirls over Saria, wondering how Seiichi landed such a hot babe for a wife, only for his jaw to drop upon discovering he also has a girlfriend and a woman slave. From this moment, Seiichi becomes his love guru, and he swears to follow his advice. On the other hand, Lorna puts on her sadistic, hot bodysuit and readies her whip to interrogate poor Olga, who is finally conscious. When nothing else works against the lowly, Lorna is forced to use her ultra-secret move, a pork cutlet bowl. Just as Seiichi wonders where this anticlimactic plot twist is heading, the hot babe begins her sadistic teasing and eats the first bite while poor Olga keeps her mouth from salivating. She promises to give her a bite if she be kind enough to spill all the tea, only for Seiichi to walk in on their roleplay and ruin all the fun. His selective sense of justice strikes again as he calls Lorna barbaric for not sharing a meal with an assassin, completely overlooking how she almost left their kingdom kingless. Louise follows right after like his faithful dog and tells Lorna she won't be eating tonight, breaking her poor maiden heart. This master-servant duo later feeds Olga, simply because Seiichi wants to fulfill his fantasy of being called Big Brother by a cute girl. Just as she finishes eating, Lousy explains that the collar around her neck has a binding spell that makes her the professional cleaner of whoever cast it on her. Seiichi's dimwit questions, why can't they just remove it? Only for Olga to grab the collar and entertain him with some lightning-style breakdance. On the other hand, the hideous duo plots to make Alaga unalive herself upon learning that she has failed the assassination mission. Elsewhere, while he swings his swords, Zakia recalls his encounter with the ugly king's assassin last night, who turned out to be a vengeful Romeo whose Juliet was unalived by the kingdom's soldiers for being a demon. He questioned why a Chad like Zakia was a slave to somebody as disgusting as his king and wondered if it was because of the high payroll. Hearing this, Zakia pulled out the fancy new sword he bought with last month's bonus and charged at the stylish ruffian, still imagining how he must have clapped those plump demon cheeks. In the end, this guy fled the scene while Zakia was still too hung up on his sus fantasy, and is now pondering why is he serving this disgusting king of all people. Back at the royal palace, Seiichi tries to manifest another pull to break Alaga free of her collar. Still, the only thing that comes to his dumb mind is a picture of America's president whenever he recalls the word free. Surprisingly, the manifestation works, and the guy with the worst beard in history shows up straight out of a magazine page, plot armor or not. This guy removes Olga's collar, and she cries upon learning she's free, and doesn't stop until Seria's warm melons comfort her. Later, now that she can speak freely, she begins with her tragic sob story like a true shounen side character. It all started when she was born with the wrong pair of genes and was concentrated in a prison, along with the other beast folk. Her mother was taken away from her for character development, and she was forced to become an assassin. Eventually, she stayed on a psychotic spree for years on end, taking countless lives without guilt, and even now that her redemption arc has begun, she still feels like her hands are stained in blood. Ignoring this, Seiichi's cultured ass uses this opportunity to clasp her hands and propose that she calls him Big Brother from now on, which the rizzed-up girl agrees to.
I don't like where this is going.
To top it all up, Seria intervenes and asks if she can join their harem, and Seiichi instantly agrees after confirming that her innocent child card is still working against the king of this city and stupidity, and he won't be putting them in jail for adopting her. Meanwhile, the villains practice their evil laughs and video call each other using their ancient webcams, excitedly sharing how they'll be ruining Seiichi's homeland with a bunch of overpowered creatures soon enough. On the other hand, as Seiichi and company practice their circus skills, particularly chakra control, Louise walks up to them with her portable greenhouse and asks Seiichi if he'll be here to take care of the king while she and the Valkyries are away. He asks if they are going on a vacation, only to learn that a powerful demon army is approaching the country's border and Laozi's former mentor, the Black Paladin, has called for their assistance. Relieved that he won't be missing their beach episode, Seiichi agrees to act as the king's bodyguard in her absence and later bids farewell to the hottest girl gang in history as it heads out to kick some monster cakes. The following day, Florio becomes Seiichi's unpaid teacher and teaches him how to control his extravagant magic. And although he wants his already overpowered arsenal to bag a control skill to help him become less of a powerhouse, the tactic doesn't work, and he suffers from being too overpowered once again. Right then, the freak duo shows up as his anti-depression pill, along with a Gandalf wannabe called Barnabas, some world-class legend Seiichi has no idea about. This pisses off Florio's weeb ass, as he's the chairman of this old man's fan club. In fact, he quickly pulls out some fan books he has spent his entire net worth on and asks if he would be kind enough to sign them, only for the demented dude to realize he's forgotten how to sign. Later, the group heads to greet Ranz, who looks like a Sailor Moon princess in his fancy new dress, and Mr. Johnny Bravo shows off the eggplant he's cultivated with utmost care to say hello to his old friend. This cultured king also simps for his muscles while Eris pulls out a sus toy to pay her respects, all while Seiichi slaps his face from secondhand embarrassment as if he isn't clapping a gorilla and a donkey behind closed doors. Later, as Barnabas steps forward to pay his respects, Ranz immediately gets down on his knees and asks that his former teacher be given a comfortable chair to sit on, only for Eris to pull up with one of her sus toys, while Seiichi throws a tantrum over it. The cultured old man seems to enjoy it. After wasting some more time with their goofy, questionable antics and fan service, they get down to talking about the real issue, which involves the old man's academy. It turns out that Kanazuki and company are still being ostracized thanks to some grand bullying scheme. And on top of it all, Barnabas worries about why trouble has been sprouting ever since these so-called heroes got summoned. Right then, their backbiting session gets interrupted by a soldier who informs them how a herd of over 5,000 monsters is approaching the capital, leaving their mouths gaping. Meanwhile, Lousy and the rest of her girl gang rendezvous with the Black Paladin, who looks more like a transformer than a magician, and try to take down the endless swarm of hideous monsters with both their endless riz and plot armor. Meanwhile, back in the capital, as the guild gets ready to find the monsters, Seiichi flashes her malnourished arms, making Seiichi wonder how she plans to fight using these twigs. Lulun, being the true queen of gluttony, worries that she might actually die if the capital is destroyed and she's left with no food to eat. On the other hand, Olga is more interested in her personal agenda and asks Seiichi if he'll pat her head if she slays the most monsters. This cultured guy wonders how all his fantasies are coming to life all of a sudden and asks her to stay safe first since he can't pat her head if there's no head left. The other weirdos from the guild plan on using their milk jugs, their spiky balls, and even their thick, hard bananas to fight the villains, while the rainbow freaks plan to use their riz alone. After a few more flashy introductions, Mr. Johnny Bravo jumps right into a swarm of monsters with his protein-amped body armor, and Detroit smacks some demon cakes in his All Might-coated panties. Eris, on the other hand, embarrasses the masochistic monsters and whips them into bite-sized pieces. Meanwhile, the Banana Man uses his third leg to launch missiles at the enemy. Lastly, the Rainbow Boy Band uses their chakra-infused fists to explode some demon black holes, leaving the audience both stunned and disgusted. As the guild moves forward with the extermination, an SS-ranked giant lion shows up, whom the classy assassin-turned-butler slashes through with utmost elegance, leaving Seiichi and the old hag thoroughly impressed. Meanwhile, Seiichi uses her gorilla fists to riz up some gorilla-sized monsters and smack them to death. And Artoria summons her inner Elsa to freeze and shatter one of these monster dudes, impressing Barnabas a lot more than Seiichi. This inspires the old man to show off some of his bad boy moves too, and he brings about some explosive magical rain and tornadoes to exterminate more demons than anyone. However, just as they all begin celebrating, it turns out that another batch of bad guys has been sent their way and shall be arriving shortly to truly whoop them this time. With this new bunch of S-rank plus monsters, Seiichi decides to finally use his wide range of hacks to prove why he's the MC, as he tries to create a new spell that would disperse all the villains while saving all his friends. Seiichi summons the Statue of Liberty and infuses it with lightning bolts. However, this time around, his plot armor fails him, and he falls to his knees after claiming he'll create yet another classic ass pull, only to clown in the end. But just as he loses all hope, the gods of plot twist have mercy on him, and his statue Kun becomes Thor, dropping lightning bolts on all the monsters and turning them into smoked barbecue. As everyone else relishes in his victory, Seiichi once again wins a long list of skills and suffers from the trauma of being overpowered until Olga shows up with her cute cat ears and asks him to pat her head. This head patting cures all his depression until the stinky old man transforms into a cute loli too, and urges Seiichi to pat his head, giving him lifelong trauma. Realizing that Seiichi has no kink for old-timers like him, Barnabas puts his true self back into the closet and asks him to become a teacher at his magic academy, only for Seiichi to turn him down, explaining how he can't leave his hot harem behind for a measly, low-paying corporate life. Since this guy understands what weebs like Seiichi have a taste for, he tells him to imagine Seiichi role-playing a hot babe in a school uniform and Artoria as a sexy headmistress. Lulun would become an ass-kicking acrobatic champion, while Olga would become his cute, lowly maid, just as he's fantasized about. Now, this was an offer he couldn't reject, and he immediately agreed to it. The next few days fly away with Seiichi, being the king of riz that he is, taking each of his hot girlies on day-long dates. Lulun expectedly takes him on an eating spree, while Artoria finally puts on some clothes to put an end to all the fan service. When it's finally Seiichi's turn, Seiichi looks forward to finally clapping her peaches, only for her to bring Olga along with them, essentially cock-blocking him. Seiichi doesn't mind it much since 2 is always better than 1. Later, as she finally leaves him alone with Seiichi, he thanks her for allowing him to sleep with so many side chicks and tells her he loves her. This moves her to tears, and they lean in for a kiss, only for the third wheel to butt in once again and call Seiichi a bad boyfriend. Sometime later, he visits Mei's painting competition with all of his hotties, where she presents a portrait of him riding Lulun and reveals how he's her knight in shining armor who saved her dying career once and turned her into a world-class simp for the rest of her life, making Seiichi flustered. When the group returns to the royal palace, Louise and company return from their month-long monster hunting and bid farewell to Seiichi after learning he's been selected to teach at the Magic Academy. On the other hand, the crisped-up bacon from Seiichi's lightning bolts gets thrashed for being a world-class failure by none other than the Demon Lord, who, for now, is nothing more than a scented candle. A few days later, Seiichi and his harem set off for their journey to the Magic Academy, and he's relieved to finally be free from the freak show he's been putting up with. Later, he thanks all his bitches for letting him clap and looks forward to a fresh start with new and improved hot chicks, hopefully without any more of those freaky weirdos. Right then, his worst nightmare comes alive as a wannabe Ant-Man jumps on top of his carriage and calls himself the hero of victory, essentially telling him he won't ever be freak-free again. This brings us to the end of Seiichi's crazy life in the Isekai land. Thanks for sticking around till the end, you absolute legend. Meanwhile, click on the screen to watch some of our other videos. Until next time, stay awesome, stay AniGeek.